Welcome to Politics Done Right on KPFT. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Give me a call at 713-526-5738. That is 713-526-KPFT. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you very much for spending this time with me. Shannon, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing great. I am so glad that the city's starting to dry out a bit, but man, those bands of rain were intense earlier, and we just need a dry spell for a second.
I know, but it's great that it's starting to dry out, and we're going to have a great show because it's going to be covering a whole lot of stuff, including young people.
Oh, yeah, and the New York primary on
yes.
Tuesday. That was very eventful. I mean, I wish it was a little bit more exciting, but...
I know, but that's okay. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to hear what people have to say. Folks, do remember this is a call-in show. The telephone number is 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. Shannon, both the Republican and Democratic nominees are almost set in stone. Many people believe that it will be Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Let us assume that is the case. Many think Donald Trump is unelectable, but you know what? I don't have to detail all his offenses. That said, when one measures the temperature of the country, it is what? Chaotic. It is a chaotic country right now, and Americans want something different. This will be a close election, in my opinion. A lot of people think it's going to be a blowout. I think Donald Trump will morph. And many Americans, I think, are going to follow. The question is whether Americans can endure a candidate offering incrementalism as opposed to blowing the lid off the current establishment. And I tell you something, I think the latter stands a good chance. The vlog of the week will cover a sentiment I've been watching on social media and elsewhere between older Democrats and younger liberals that I believe should be heeded. But before we get into all of that, I want to talk about or remind folks about what we have here to offer. I want to remind all our listeners that KPFT is a bastion of intelligent voices and programs. As a political activist, my favorites are The Monitor with Mark Bebawi on Mondays at 7 p.m. Think Wing Radio with Mike Honig on Mondays at 9 p.m. Partisan Gridlock with Jeff Berg on Fridays at 3 p.m. And of course, there is Jazz Latino, Afro-Cuban Latin Jazz, that it is very best hosted by Juan Flores, my good friend Juan Flores, on Mondays at 10 p.m. And he also hosts at noon, I believe, on Thursdays. Today, his show came
in the HD3 room.
On HD3. So he's pretty cool.
So he brings his grooves to both venues.
Yeah, he's just lucky he has two of them. Anyhow. Check out our full schedule at kpft.org, where you can find programming from music to politics to medicine to the eclectic. KPFT is a listener-supported public community radio station, so please remember that if you like what you hear, visit kpft.org and ensure we remain a strong, viable community radio station that provides news, programming, and information not influenced by the corporatocracy. This is KPFT 90.1 FM in Houston, Texas. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear your thoughts, so let's talk. You can follow us on Twitter at Politics Done Right, the hashtag Politics Done Right. Twitter, hashtag Egberto Willies. You can listen to the live stream or listen to the podcast. Folks, this is what you want. So, folks, you know what time it is? Or I should say, Shannon, guess what time it is?
It's time for the weekly blog post.
Okay, folks. I titled this one Acquiescent to the Deficient New Normal. And, I subtitled that earlier for most, let's say, the young folks, that pretty much saying that young people no longer want to, in a lot of ways, they're fed up. And I actually think justifiably so. But I want to present this with the most respect to the older folk who sometimes take it on the chin when they hear it. But again, let's go. It goes this way. After watching the results of the New York primary, I knew that the activity level in my sphere of Facebook would be very active. I have three distinct groups of followers: conservative Republicans, Democrats, and left-wing liberals. Conservative Republicans were pretty quiet. A few of my left-wing liberals went a bit overboard with conspiracy theories about the New York outcome. Some were unnecessarily disrespectful to Senator Clinton's. Feelings are still raw on both sides. Of course, I suggested that it be toned down because, again, we don't need negativity against Hillary Clinton. She has her way of being, and I think we need to respect everybody's opinions, everybody's what they think is right. But we all need to get in together and fight. Of course, moving on. As a left-wing liberal myself, I was disappointed that Sanders have yet to make the sale with enough people in other demographics. People in general want familiarity. You have to reach them through their hearts. Clinton did that long ago. Her perceived sins to these communities forgiven by many. Sanders got a late start. He never endeared himself to other communities in a timely manner. It may be a hill too steep for him to climb. Drew Weston wrote a book called The Political Brain, and I plug this book all of the times because I think this book is great in the way it talks to you on how to reach people, not just from a intellectual point of view, but you actually speak to their hearts, things that matter to them. So I always recommend one read the book, The Political Brain, The Role of Emotion in Deciding the Fate of the Nation. That applies to both, doesn't only apply to conservatives, it also applies to liberals. You have to reach people where they are. After watching the reactions of many, I posted a little rant of my own. In that rant, I pointed out, and I must preface the rant, I came up with this rant because as I was going through the feed, there are a whole lot of people saying different things, and I just wanted to have one concise story or message I wanted to give there, and then have people listen to that message. Okay, and have people listen to that message. So I wrote it as a rant, and then a whole lot of people followed it and shared it and did whatever they wanted with it. And that rant, I pointed out the following. I said, look, Hillary has more popular votes and pledged delegates. That is a fact. It will take a lot of grassroots work to overcome that. It will likely not be overcome in this election. That must not stop engagement. Suits, superdelegate fights, and all that stuff are not the answers. Continuation in building the movement, irrespective of the outcome, is. Keeping the people who finally enter the political process is. To do that requires that we give them a purpose and achievable goals. Every politician is an empty vessel to be filled. So far, it has been filled with the will of the plutocracy. It is time for us to concentrate more on movement building, a movement that will replace the pollution they're filled with, instead with the values of the movement. Again, achievable goals that keep people engaged and not deflated. This rant led to a very healthy, civil, and respectful Facebook discussion. A dear friend, Professor Pogue, started a new Facebook discussion that encapsulated much of what afflicts today's body politic. And he wrote the following, and I think it's important for older folks. He's a younger professor, but I think it's important for older folks to understand where the young people are coming from, and I'm going to get to that in more detail after I get to what I'm reading here. And it's a bit longer than normal, folks, but hang with me and get ready to call, because I also want to talk about this in detail. Look, and he said the following in the message that he had on Facebook, which I found touching. Many Americans feel a void. I think part of this is because our nation has lost its sense of national purpose. We no longer stand for anything. It no longer means anything to be an American. We are a nation of people who are defined by personal greed, selfish ambition, and love of fancy gadgets, entertainment, and gossip that continually distract us from many meaningful thought, contemplations, or meaning. Our value comes not from being human beings or even from being part of a community, but from how many commodities we have. And we live in a world where those commodities that give people value are becoming increasingly scarce for everyone outside the top 1%. We will never make America great by expanding business interests to further a culture of greed and selfishness. To make America great, we will have to develop a national purpose that puts community, national identity, and the advancement of the philosophy of the heart and mind ahead of selfishness and materialism. There's a whole lot within that one paragraph, and I hope people accept it with the tone that it was evident he was trying to get across. That all of this did not occur in a vacuum, okay, folks? It was a slow process of plutocratic indoctrination that got us to the point. It will be slow getting us back to our real values. It will be slow disassociating capital from our individual real worth as humans. It's not an easy thing. We've been indoctrinated for a long time. It's going to take a while. So anyway, a woman responded to him and said, she gave a long response, but there's a little piece of what she said that I thought is of interest. She said, I would argue that in many ways there is at least more opportunity for more Americans now than there has been historically, unless we limit that history to white men. And I was surprised that she actually said it that way, unless we limit it. But anyhow, this provided the perfect segue for the professor to get historical. Most importantly, he provided a context to much of the subtext in the Democratic primary. And here is what he said. I think limiting that history to white men is the only fair calculation due to the oppressive nature of everyone else's throughout history. To expect minorities, women, or any other classifications of people, including white men, to be happy to be treated in any way less than white men have historically been treated is unfair, oppressive, and discriminatory. Think about that. To celebrate the fact that minorities and women are treated better than they used to be is premature, as long as women and minorities are still being treated as less than white men. To celebrate these accomplishments also ignores that fact that white men are worse off than they used to be, not because of the success of women or minorities, but because of the success of a small group of white men that has exploited everyone else in the process. And I think that was an important concept that the professor brought out there. It was pretty important, because what he's trying to realize is something that I've always spoken about, and that is how we've used a whole lot of concepts to distort reality. The expectation of relative complacency, whether by Hillary Clinton's incrementalism or Donald Trump's racial and ethnic scapegoating to absolve real systemic problems, is the issue. Professor Poe continued. And we're going to expand on this a bit later. He said, we've always had selfishness, and we have always had the community, but I believe the dominant American culture tends to swing like a pendulum between having a focus on the public good and having a focus on the private good. In the 1820s, Americans focus on business and private interests, and until conditions were made unacceptable, we had an awakening in the 1830s. And he goes on to point out that there are a whole lot of differences or things that have occurred throughout history that it's not new, but today it takes on new value. Today we will celebrate the businessman who reduces others down to nothing more than a commodity to exploit in his desire for his personal fortune. But we denounce the well-meaning individual who devotes his life to service to the new public good. I long for a day when we celebrate civic virtue. I long for the day and denounce greed, when we no longer celebrate the rags to riches story, but instead celebrate the person who was born poor and took everyone else on a path to prosperity with him, even if it means he sacrificed a fortune in the process. When personal value is not based on wealth and celebrity, but on goodness, kindness, and civic virtue. I know that some people think I'm being too idealistic, but I don't see that as a problem. We have lacked optimism for a long time. Look, Americans have been made to believe that demanding what they have earned, what they deserve, is too idealistic. Ensuring that every single American has access to success is not idealistic, it is American. Ensuring that in the age that Americans do not backslide into financial states of yesteryear's generations is not idealistic. It's American. Demanding that gainful employment pays a living wage is not idealistic. It's American. If business cannot pay employees appropriately, it is a hobby or a flawed business model. Americans have been so beaten down over the years that many fear the fight for what is rightfully theirs. Many acquiesce to the new deficient normal. It is not the job of it is the job, however, of activists to mitigate that reality. Good activists must be the vitamins that keep hope alive as they work to help change hope and reality. Folks, the telephone number is 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. I want you to give us a call. I want you to talk about this openly. Old folk, young folk, middle folks, people in the middle, everything. I want to hear from you. But let's go ahead and get started with line number one. Line number one, I think we have Leo. Come on in, Leo.
Hey, Umberto. I hate to talk about something actually from last week, but I called up and talked to you, and you seem to be on a rather defamatory thing against big pharmaceuticals and medical companies in general.
Okay.
And you quoted some article that you'd read from some institute or something, primarily in your blog.
Yes, sir.
But I actually went online and did a bunch of research and found quite a different set of circumstances in which private enterprise pays for, much more of the medical research, and that actually the government, the National Institute of Health, pays for a good chunk, but 501s pay for a bunch of it. And when you combine all those together, 501s and the government, it comes to about $48 billion, whereas industry pays for about $70 billion, and for about a total of $119 billion. Whereas some of these single-payer systems that you're so enamored of, like Canada, $5 billion, I mean, in other words, they're pretty much sucking hind tit, when it comes to paying for medical research. And one of my points was that these entities like that tend to piggyback on the American capitalist system. As evil as it may be, the idea that somebody's going to invest money and might even squirrel out a profit, does seem to produce results. In fact, private enterprise, according to Wikipedia, to give you my source, I don't want anybody to vet, I want everybody to vet me, that's for dang sure, that private industry has almost doubled. I think they're actually more than doubled. They've risen in the past 10 years from 32% up to 62% of this funding.
I'm glad that you did your research, Leo. I'm happy that you did your research. I just want to tell you that make some points here. First of all, everything that I said last week, I stand by. I did the research on it, and what you're talking about is actually what you said does not conflict in the least with what I said at all. And when you take a look at, when you said there are a whole lot of these researches that are done by 501c3s and C4s, 501 non-profit organizations, you're correct. Well, you're correct that the amount points out to approximately half the number listed. What isn't shown, and the reason it isn't shown is because these books aren't open, is how the private sector determine what they called cost or investment cost. The investment cost is a nebulous thing. What I mean by that is within Forma, what you find is, and then we're going to get back on the subject, but I just want to clarify you because I don't want to leave you with hanging on this particular issue. Within the Forma's development bill is included things like advertising. It's including things like what they pay their shareholders. It's including things like those are all expenses on the books. So when a private when a 501 entity or the government is paying for things, all their costs are generally in the aggregate going towards the research, going towards the analysis. When we're talking about the private sector doing it, all those other areas become cost centers. When it comes to when you talk about Canada's investment, take a look at Canada's population relative to the American population, and you just gave a figure. And your figure said, oh, Canada used $5 billion. Well, if Canada has a population of I guess somewhere 1/10 or 1/8 of America, that looks like they're investing quite a bit of money relative to their population. So, we have to be proportional in the way we analyze different issues. When it comes to big pharma, you can take a look at simply one factor. What's their profit margins? And not only that, when it applies to drugs that are out there that are past the 17-year patent period, and how the things that they use to renegotiate patents so that, again, they can continue charging the prices that they charge. We're discussing apples and oranges. What your research is absolutely right, but it does not conflict with anything that I said. It's just a matter of how they present that data in such a manner that it gives you the semblance of being in conflict. We're not in conflict, sir. You can go ahead and re-corroborate what I said. There's a place called citizens.org. They have the data that's all corroborated that I would suggest that you go to citizens.org, because it's wide open and you can actually see it. So, Leo, is there a quick thing you got to go before I go to the next person? And folks, do remember this is a call-in show, 713-526-573.
Basically, your so-called rant today, I'd say that if you want to change people's opinion about greed and their basic values, it's going to take a lot of parenting.
Yes, no, Leo, don't laugh at that. The reality.
I'm not laughing. Yeah. I'm not laughing at all. I worked for a school district for many, many, many years.
And Leo,
and I saw it firsthand.
Leo, let me tell you something, brother. When you say parenting, you're correct. But our system is so parents with households that, because of our plutocratic behavior with parents, that where two parents have to be working, where parents and kids have to be working, there isn't a whole lot of time for parenting. When we get our social structures in such a manner that people can live a real life where they don't have to be enslaved to corporations and enslaved to a system that requires them to work continuously, then parenting will become a possibility again. Right now, we're asking parents to be great parents, and at the same time, we're telling them they have to work their butts off in order to just maintain a barely subsistent standard of living. That's so. All your advice is right, but we have to have policies that make the advice feasible. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful day. Let's go to line number 2 with Jerry. Line number 2, Jerry. Come on in, Jerry.
Yeah. I'd just like to say in reference to your last caller there, it's amazing how they want to shut up, how drug companies shut up when you start asking them for the details on the breakdown of the price structure on drugs and stuff like that. They'll sit there and tell you something like, it takes $100 million to bring a drug to market.
Right.
But when you sit there and ask them to give you the breakdown on it, everybody shuts down.
Well, Jerry, that is the reason why. I mean, and again, you cannot blame Leo for the information that's out there. That information is out there, and unless you're able to to go within the details of the information, that's why Americans are misinformed. Don't you think the drug companies are busy putting out a whole lot of information that simply makes it seem that they're investing more than they invest? Of course, that's what they're doing. So anyhow, but I want to keep the subject now on the election and
that's fine with me.
young people.
I just wanted to say that because it just amazes me how people buy into stuff the drug companies say and all that stuff.
Well,
I'm not an anti-capitalist by any stretch of the imagination, but it just amazes me. But anyway, go ahead.
Beforehand, I'm glad that you brought that up because I want to clear that up too. I don't think anybody is anti-capitalist. Let me tell you something, okay? What people are, and line 3 and 4, I'm coming to you guys shortly. What is important for people to understand when we talk about capitalism and free enterprise? First of all, free enterprise is not capitalism. What I did as a software developer and formed a company, that is free enterprise. I was free to do all these things and create my own business. It becomes capitalism if I decided that, okay, I don't want to work as hard. I'm going to sell shares in my company. When I sell shares in my company, I would have capitalized my company. When I capitalize my company, those shareholders would sit on their butts and do absolutely nothing while I hire some other people to do the work. For the most part, I may sit pretty, and all those people's wages or all those people's dividends that they get from their investment is the excess labor of all the other people that are working. You have to mitigate that, otherwise it's a form of indentured servitude. But that's a different subject that I don't want to touch on. But nobody here, capitalism had corporations had a good reasons. They were created. You created a corporation to do a certain public good. And when that public good was completed, the corporation was out of existence. We have now made corporations a person. And in making a corporation a person, we've given it life in perpetuity. And in giving it life in perpetuity, they do whatever they need to survive, including hurting people to survive. So people have to understand these concepts before they simply say, oh, you're anti-capitalist or you're anti-corporation. Nobody's anti-corporations. Corporations can serve a very good purpose. But when their purpose is over, when they're done developing whatever they're developing, it should then be, the corporation should come out of existence and we then have things back into the public domain. Nobody wants to talk about the reality of how these things should work. Anyhow, on the election.
On the election, you're absolutely right. White guys in this country have gotten, for the most part, a raw deal unless they're wealthy.
Right.
And this is something that's been lost on a whole bunch of people. It's amazing to me. And all that. This is something that Christopher Lasch actually brought up in relation, especially to women's rights, the women's liberation movement. He sat there and said, there's no arguing with the justice of their cause. But he sat there and pointed out that, basically unless you fundamentally change the political economy of the country, you're just going to wind up having the same problems that men have and that have just gotten worse for men.
Right.
I'll tell you another group that doesn't get this at all, hardly, is GLBT people.
Right.
They just, anything that involves class or race, they want to run away from. It's shocking how little, and I won't say on KPFT, the couple of shows that talk about that, it's not that they don't talk about that. Usually they don't want to deal with that at all.
Well, I mean, that fact comes sometimes that a lot of different demographics at times tend to be insular, and that is and that serves the purpose of or plutocracy, right? If every group is insular, if every group only are concerned about their particular issue, then it's hard.
Issues are right.
Right. Then it defeats the purpose of people coming together so that they can go against the one class that are always together, and that is the class who owns all the capital or owns most of the capital. Now, the biggest fear of everyone is when, and you would have heard me say this all of the times on my show, when we unite Appalachia, the ghettos, and the barrios, that's when we're going to have real change. And and that's a cliche, that's a stereotype. But within that, what I'm saying is
but there's an element there. You basically make a point there that's legitimate.
Right. So I mean, what I tell folks is when we put all these things together, we would have solved the problem. Now there are some issues. I'm going to go to the other calls, Jerry, because I also want to talk about young people and what they think about the election.
Jerry.
So Jerry, I have to go to a break. And then I'm going to come to, I think, Scott and then Johnny. So now...
Okay, well, I'll let you go then.
Did you have something quickly to say, add, Jerry, real quickly?
Well, just that, basically people haven't really, they've been too hung up about identity politics.
Right.
The one group I give a break to on this is African Americans. They had to do something.
There you go.
And everything. But they're the only group I give a break to on this.
All right,
everybody else should have doubled down on changing the political economy of the country before as their first number one issue before they went in and sat there and said, we want all of our rights as women, all of our rights as GLBT people, all of our rights as Hispanics and all that. African Americans, you get a break from me because you had to do what you had to do.
All right, we'll talk about that later. I thank you very much, Jerry. I'm going to go off the traffic now. And
all right, thanks.
Thank you for calling.
All right, thank you, Egberto. And let's take a brief look at weather around town. It is currently 69 degrees and overcast skies, 50% chance of scattered thunderstorms through today, especially after those bands of heavy rain earlier today. Low tonight of 64 degrees, and those thunderstorms will continue through tonight. Partly cloudy skies after midnight. Tomorrow, expect sunny skies with a few passing clouds, high of 86 degrees, and not a chance of rain in sight until Sunday. And with that said, we still have that mandatory evacuation for parts of the city of Wharton along the Colorado River, and that's due to the rising river water. And let's take a quick look at traffic around town. There are still currently 18 high water locations in the greater Houston area, including but not limited to. On the East Freeway outbound at Lockwood, the right lane and shoulder have just been cleared, thank goodness. So that's no longer an issue. But inbound on the East Freeway at Monmouth near the San Jacinto River, the exit ramp and 3 frontage road lanes are closed due to high flood water. All main lanes of Highway 6 in both directions from Clay to Park Row are still submerged underwater and absolutely closed. And on the East Tex Freeway inbound between the San Jacinto River and 1960, 1 to 2 frontage road lanes remain flooded at this time. And a few accidents to keep your eye out for around town at the moment. On the West Loop southbound at Westheimer, a multiple vehicle accident is affecting the right lane and shoulder, backing up traffic to the Katy Freeway. And on the South Sam Houston Tollway, eastbound before the Southeast Plaza, a multiple vehicle accident is affecting the center lane to right shoulder, backing up traffic to 288. That's a look at your afternoon commute and a little bit of your weather around town. I'm Shannon McCurdy, and you are listening to KPFT Houston 90.1 with Politics Done Right with Egberto Willies.
Muchísimas gracias, Shannon. Okay, folks, let's go to line number 3 with, I think that is Scott. Come on in, Scott.
Thank you. When I was a young person, I assumed I'd be voting for every election, no matter what, and I still do. I've only missed about 2 or 3 elections in the last 50 years.
Good for you.
Now, as for purpose, well, at the beginning, I wanted Texas to be a 2-party state. I got told often that Republicans could never get elected, and now they do. In fact, they make it very difficult for Democrats to get elected in many places. But I decided in just 5 years that I was in the wrong party, and a bigger purpose for me was the GLBT rights movement. There really wasn't one in 1962, but when I first voted, but there certainly was one in 1970. And well, I don't tie voting all that much to a big purpose. I have my doubts about whether everybody would vote if they, even with a unifying purpose.
Now, what do you think about what do you think about what we're talking about with regards to the young people's disappointment with how the current election within the Democratic Party is occurring?
Oh, I'd like to see a bigger nucleus of young people who vote regardless.
Okay.
I don't believe in this conditional commitment to voting. I've seen it in the Democratic Party for the last 4 years. I don't think it has served the party very well. I keep hearing people need a reason to vote. I don't think that idea has served us very well. If people would vote in the primaries, they could draw in more people, and they could get more contested primaries,
Sure.
and they could have more choice. And certainly, if they agree with the purposes of.
Well, Scott, look, thank you very much for calling, my friend. I have
Okay.
to run to the other call. They're
Yep.
starting to fill up, my friend. So thank you
Okay.
for the call. Let's go to line number 4 with Johnny. Come on in, Johnny.
Okay. I missed part of your program, so I don't know if you all mentioned this about the electoral situation, but I first wanted to address the big pharma issue.
Hold one second. Let me just say one thing. Folks,
callers back.
we just lost a few
I find
calls.
It funny that in spite of all the media attention we've had over the past few years,
Someone wants you
including
to call him,
popular
that's all.
documentarians like Michael Moore, in spite of all that attention, you got people that call in defending the big pharma. So unless they actually make their living from big pharma or they're very wealthy, I don't see the logic behind what motivates somebody to call in with a contentious attitude to speak to you and try to denigrate you or your blog in the name of defending big pharma. That's really suspicious, especially when we have Americans who go over the Canadian border to buy their medications that's produced in the United States, and we have people traveling south of the border to do the same thing and to get dental care.
Yeah, let me first say that I am not going to assume that somebody had any superfluous reasons for I mean, he said he went and did his research. I think what happens a lot of times, John, is as follows. And before I finish that, folks, we have open lines 713-526-5738. A few calls just dropped off. 713-526-5738, and we're keeping on the subject. Anyway, what I think is important to remember is the following. There is an industry out there that tries to maintain the status quo. In other words, they want to ensure that most Americans are not abreast of the information, because the most dangerous thing for our current system is an educated populace, period. So therefore, we have a lot of foundations. We have the heritage foundations, and we have Cato and all of these guys that put out material that, again, if you were to look at the material that they put out, you can't say that the material is wrong. What you can say is the inference that the material provides is wrong in the way they present it. And that is what occurred with Leo when he called in. He called in with correct information. He called in, because it's not like I hadn't read the information that he talked about. I could have easily said, no, in fact, you're a bit too high. It's only 24% that the National Health, NHS actually puts out there for research, etc. But again, it's based on the total dollars given, included by the numbers provided by the drug company. So, I mean, there is an industry out there that is designed to conflate, that is designed to fool Americans into believing that the system as it is today is the best that we can expect. One of the reasons I wrote the blog that I wrote today now, which quoted a whole lot of pretty much a thread that I found on Facebook, was simply because it showed a young man who was diving into a whole lot of the issues that are currently affecting Americans. And what I noticed from the particular postings that he made on Facebook is that a whole lot of, in general, a lot of the older people were really being fairly negative with the young man for wanting and for expecting more. And then if you notice in the blog, one of the things that I said is, it is not wrong to ask or to demand these parts. It's not It's not wrong to demand that we get a free education, free college education. It is not wrong to demand that we have a healthcare system, a universal healthcare system. All these issues are Americans. In fact, if we go further into history, what we find is a lot of the people that are maligning our young people today by saying these young people are trying to get things for free, they're simply wrong, because if we take a look at, if we compare the young people of the 1970s or the young people of the 1980s, let's look at Texas. In the 1970s and 80s, you went to the University of Texas for $4 per credit hour. Foreigners, which I paid the foreign fee when I initially went to the University of Texas, was 10 times that amount, and even that was cheap by comparison. $4 an hour for the American for Texas residents, which was almost peanuts. I mean, everybody could afford the $4 an hour per semester to go to school, and $40 for foreigners. They could afford the $40 for foreigners. Now, because we've bought into a policy that the voters of the 80s put into effect by electing the wrong people, we have really hurt our young people. Now comes a leader that is trying to offer young people, not only young people, but Americans in general, an option, but says, yes, it's going to cost some, but we are trying to talk to these kids and tell these kids, yes, you should demand a free education. Yes, Americans, you should demand a minimum wage. You should demand all these things. And even some of those who should believe as these young people and as these real progressive believe that, yes, you should demand these things, they're out there saying, it'll cost too much. Why are you wanting things for free? Forgetting two specific things. First of all, in the past, they got to go to college without breaking the bank, without having a mortgage to go to college. They also were able to partake of good health care that cost a lot less then. They were also getting, if you adjust for inflation, a better wage. So all these things, the baby boomers who are now, many complaining on the conservative side, many are complaining on the liberal side, oh, they want something for free. The young people, the hard American workers, are not asking for anything that was not provided for, that isn't really moral of the past. So
yeah, I have vague memories of like mid 1980, early 1981, when I was reading articles in the paper, and I was starting to put two and two together, saying, "Oh wow!" Just when I'm scheduled to graduate in '81. For college students beyond that, it's going to be hard. It's going to start getting harder, more expensive. Well, they started pulling up the ladder back then,
Johnny, and it's sad because, like I said, you know, a lot of our folks today, including baby boomers, want to disassociate themselves from the responsibility of what occurred over the last 30 years. I wrote a blog and I'm coming to you next, John. I wrote a blog I guess it was over a year ago, where I said, baby boomers, that it's time to take responsibility for what we've done to our kids. Something like that I said. And the reason I wrote it, it was specific and because we are the ones, and when I say we, I'm talking in the aggregate. I know there are a lot of people who didn't elect Reagan. I know there are a lot of people who didn't ask Bill Clinton to get rid of Glass-Steagall. I know there was a lot of people who didn't vote for Bush who wanted, but again, Bush started another trend. But I mean, I know that. I understand that. However, in the aggregate, those people who voted those politicians in set the course. And when they say, oh, we can't afford it, what do you mean by we can't afford these issues? If somebody if somebody bombs a city tomorrow, we will consider it an emergency and we will create the necessary monies. And notice I said create the necessary monies, because that is what we do. We create money. People who think money is just something that is fixed in value, they need to take an economics class, because we would create the money necessary to fight wars. We should create. Yes, sir.
I agree, and I want to just change the subject real quick before I hang up.
Okay, go ahead.
Tuesday night after the New York primary on MSNBC, they had Steve Kornacki carrying the water for the Clinton people like you would not believe. Right as plain as day, they had a graphic map of the United States, 16 states to go, totaling 1,326 delegates. California alone has 475 delegates, okay? Now, Bernie's campaign manager carefully, politely corrected Kornacki to say, I agree with you that we need to erase, what he said erase, that's Kornacki's language, to erase 235 delegates. Well, if you do the math, that's about half of the delegates of California alone.
Right.
Yet they're pushing him to say, how come you guys aren't dropping out of the race?
Right.
And even the next morning on that To Be Fair program, whatever they call that thing, on MSNBC, what's-his-face was very insulting towards the campaign manager. I mean, this is the kind of nastiness you get when the entrenched powers do not want to give up what they have. So you're absolutely right. And it's going to be an uphill battle. And I'd say to any people who are thinking about voting for Bernie, don't change your mind. Stick to your guns. It's way far from over.
All right, Johnny, thank you very much. But I didn't necessarily want to go on that subject.
That's his name, Halpern, on that goofy show of his in the afternoon.
Yes.
With all due respect. Yeah, what an ironic title for a bunch of... I don't want to even say it on
I got
radio.
it. Thank you very much, Johnny. You have a good one, my friend.
Good day.
Okay, let's go to John on line 1. John on line 1.
Egberto, how are you doing, sir?
Talk to me, my friend.
You know, I have a really hard time
this.
wrapping my conservative mind around this concept that we're talking about for college.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, I'm somebody who went to school, went to college, got a couple Pell Grants, got some loans, and myself paid off all my loans.
Right.
And I didn't ask for, other than the Pell Grants, I mean, I just didn't expect it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I just have kind of a hard time of this expectation of free college.
Let me put that in perspective. I tell you what, I am going to go to traffic. I'm keeping you hot.
Sure.
Whenever as a side comment, I received many Pell Grants as well. I mean, I went to private school and I got very lucky with my package about how many scholarships I received, but I'm still paying off the loans at the moment.
I want to address what he's going to say.
It was very expensive.
I know, and you're right. After the traffic, I want to stay with me, John. I'm going to be right back to you.
All right, let's take a brief look at our weather around town. First and foremost, it is currently 69 degrees and overcast skies, 50% chance of scattered thunderstorms throughout the day, but nothing like what we saw earlier today with those wide bands of thunderstorms. Okay, tonight, thunderstorms will persist through tonight, low near 64 degrees, partly cloudy skies after midnight, and tomorrow expect sunny skies with a few passing clouds. High of 86 degrees and not a chance of rain in sight, fortunately, until Sunday. And let's take a brief look at our traffic around town. On the West Loop northbound at Post Oak, a multiple vehicle accident is affecting the right shoulder, backing up traffic to Forness. And on the West Loop southbound at Westheimer, there is an accident involving 4 vehicles affecting the right lane and shoulder, backing up traffic to the Katy Freeway. And there's still that accident on the South Sam Houston Tollway eastbound before the Southeast Plaza. That's a multiple vehicle accident affecting the center lane to right shoulder, backing up traffic still to 288. And there's still about 18 high water locations around town at this moment. That includes all main lanes of Highway 6 in both directions from Clay to Park Row. They're all submerged underwater. On FM 529 at the Grand Parkway, high water is covering 3 frontage road lanes in both directions there. And at FM 2920 westbound at Telge, that remains completely submerged underwater at this moment. And on the East Tex Freeway inbound before the San Jacinto River and between the San Jacinto River and 1960, there's still 1 to 2 frontage road lanes that remain flooded underwater in a number of areas in between those areas. But that's a look at your afternoon commute and a little bit of your weather around town. I'm Shannon McCurchie, and you are listening to KPFT Houston 90.1 Politics Done Right with Egberto Willies.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Thank you very much. Okay, you said said your statement, John, was you have a hard time wrapping your conservative mind, and I don't even think you need to have a hard time wrapping your conservative mind around it. And let me tell you the justification.
Thank you for calling KPFT, Politics Done Right.
Let me tell you
Would you like to go on the air?
Let me tell you the justification for that. Okay.
Okay.
And it's a bit simple. You as a conservative, you support K through 12 perfectly. You don't have a problem with that. You feel that. Do you have a problem with K through 12?
Well, let me put it to you. I don't have a problem with it, but I have kids.
Right.
Okay. But I can understand, and I've had this discussion with people who do have a problem with it, who are single or never having children, and I can understand their point to a degree.
Right.
When they say they don't feel they should be subsidizing somebody else's education. Now,
Right.
I understand that to a point, but yes, I do agree. And also to throw this preface in there so you can give me a little bit more of your knowledge, you know, in the line of work that I currently do, I have the opportunity to work with a number of people who have not gone past high school that are running $1 million+ businesses.
Right.
And they're very successful people. And I see what the hard work ethic that they brought to them without college still did for them. But so you understand what I have an issue with is I have a hard time subsidizing an art history degree that can't find a job.
Right, I understand that, but let me first tell you, I don't believe in micromanaging taxes per se. Okay, because there are a lot of things that you feel that are important to you that I may not feel is important to me. But
Correct.
Because we are a society, we open the door for the vast majority of things to be done. Now, when it comes to in the past, we never had people we never paid for high school. We never paid for these issues. But we found out that we made a better society if we had a more educated society, so that we could create the manufacturing base that we have. The same applies to college today. We do need a more educated college based on where manufacturing is going and so forth. You are absolutely correct that there are, in fact, the person who taught me the most in when I started with software development was a young man without a college degree. He was self-taught and learned. So, I mean, you're absolutely correct, but for the vast majority of people, they need that extra education. And should society provide that? I believe it should provide that. And now, because we provide a whole lot of other stuff, we socialize a whole lot of the corporatocracy. Now, here's the problem, John. A lot of people are calling at the end right now, and so I have to run to another call. I'm not going to forget about this. Let's do this next week and call earlier so we can get in more detail on this particular issue. Okay, buddy?
Absolutely, Egberto. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you very much, sir.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's go to line number 2. I think that is John. Come on in, John.
Good afternoon, Egberto.
How you doing, my friend?
Good. I really like what Professor Pogue wrote, especially this sentence here about we are a nation of people who are defined by personal greed, selfish ambition, and a love for fancy gadget, entertainment, and gossip that continually distract us from any meaningful thought, contemplation, or meaning.
Right.
I think that's really
the core.
On point there. It's extremely important. And this is also, talks about something that I ran about a lot on your show is tax phobia.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is what it's about. I mean, I've been, very poor in my life, and now, I'm doing a little bit better. And to be honest with you, I really don't feel that much different. I mean, I think that this whole emphasis, and this is what I really loved about the Sanders campaign, and is that he didn't bring it up on every stump speech, but I mean, he brought it up quite a bit, about the greed, the personal greed, how everybody, is infected by this greed. And this is also politically, this is gone through the Reagan tax scheme. It really has to be taken down. And that's one of the greatest things about the Sanders campaign is it's not just talking about typical issues, political issues. It's talking about more philosophical issues.
Right. Now, John,
like greed.
The reason I'm glad that you felt the same way of the prose that the young man wrote, because that is why I brought it into the thing, because I thought it spoke. Did you want to say something?
I was just talking to Egberto before the show about that same vein of why our culture is so materialistic. I mean, it has a lot to do with capitalism, but a lot more to do with the nature of our culture being focused on individualism and competitive. And we put ourselves ahead of being more community-centered. It's about the individual too much, and we kind of need to change that. I hope that you can change something that's that ingrained in a culture itself. But
I think we can.
Yeah, hopefully we can.
I mean, let me tell you, and that's important what you just said. I think we've been taught this individualism so that these guys on top can put out these kind of values into us that we suddenly think, as John say, that somehow taxes are so bad or some, so I mean, it's all by design, and it's not necessarily a scheme. It's just about putting together the worst of human nature. Mm-hmm. Right? Don't you think so, John?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that somehow we've lost our way. I mean, and I guess that this is what he was talking about in some later paragraphs, was
right.
saying, how historically this has been that way in many, through most of our country. And this is why I feel that the Europeans are so much more advanced than we are, and then not just the Europeans, but the Canadians and all these
right.
other countries too. And so I just, all this talk about American exceptionalism, there are a lot of great things about America, but I mean, we have to be realistic
right.
about the things that we really haven't been so great about. And the
change.
fact that we're so obsessed by greed
right.
is one of the worst things about American culture, and that's what was
John?
so captured by the Sanders movement and all the
John,
millennials who believe in this,
right.
because they seem to really, that captures
John, I only
them,
have 2 minutes. I got to go. I only have 2 minutes, and I got to go. So to one more call. Let's go to Gary real quick. Gary, you're going to get 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just wanted to make an argument in favor of art history majors.
Yes, sir.
And by the way, Guy, you're asking for me to dog you like I did Barry. And the guy is begging for the same kind of treatment I've been giving Barry over the decades.
Go for
but
it,
anyway, the point is that actually liberal arts majors, and particularly art history majors, they get a hell of a lot more out of college. They actually learn more in college
okay.
than any other group.
Okay.
Out of all the different majors and all that. Guess who learns the least?
Who learns the least?
Business majors.
Okay.
The research has been done.
Okay.
It's cut and dried. That's the way it's been, and that's the way it's been for a long, long time.
Thank you, Gary.
So he needs to check his facts out a little bit more than he has.
Okay, I'll tell him to check his facts. Thank you very much, Gary.
Yeah, call me. I gave her my number. Gave her my.
No problem, buddy.
You got my number.
Got
Call
you.
me back.
You have a good one, buddy. Let's go now to the last call. Samuel, come on in.
Yes. Hey, how's it going, Roberto?
Perfect. Egberto, thank you.
Yes, my apologies. Last time I called was when we were talking about the media and how they misconstrue a lot of what is truthful in this day and age in society. I heard a lot of talk about the materialism of the U.S. and how the country itself has a very needy and greedy culture.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of individualism in this country, which I've noticed for some time now. I'm very active in the Houston community.
You got 30 seconds, my friend.
I've talked to many different kinds of people who have different views. And I just want to understand or get your take on what you think about taxes. Do you think they should be voluntary, or do you think they should be something everybody has to pay? I mean, there's a lot of issues about where money's going.
I got to go. So we're at a hard stop now. I appreciate your call, Samuel. I'll tell you real quickly. Taxes cannot be voluntary. Everybody has to pay taxes because we all benefit from what all of us give each other. So, folks, thank you, Samuel, for calling. Folks, we have to come to the end of the show. Thank you very much for having listened to Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willies. Let's be back next week. And I am out.
Politics Done Right. Thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. You can personally reach me by sending an email to egberto@politicsdoneright.com. Remember, Egberto is spelled E-G-B-E-R-T-O. Change starts with you. 90.1 KPFT gives you information not tainted by corporate interest. Please visit kpft.org and contribute. Let's ensure continued access to real information and news remain available to all. Again, thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right.